Okay, welcome back to On the Ball, the video podcast from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. Really excited to have Michael Gold with us, joining us from Columbus, Ohio. Michael, you're an entrepreneur and co-founder of Future Fans, which we'll talk about an activity box that helps families with young children sort of share their love of sports and develop that love with their kids as a way to build relationships and build the next generation of fans. As a father of two kids myself, I was really interested when I heard about this. My daughter is 13, my son is 11. I'm obviously a big sports fan, and we have a goal of taking our kids to every Major League Baseball stadium before they're out of the house. So
Okay,
sports
how's
has
that
been a way
going?
that have related to each other and spend our summers together. So really excited to dive into this with you, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So this idea of sports being a connector between generations. I know that you have a personal story that relates to that as well. It sounds like growing up, your grandparents were a big part of you becoming a sports fan and some of the traditions in your life as a young kid. I was wondering if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have these kind of memories, sports and family. And for me, growing up in Columbus, we were big Cincinnati Reds fans, and so have great memories with my grandmother actually. Going down to Cincinnati and watching Paul O'Neill and all these great players in the 80s and 90s at Cincinnati Reds games. I remember she bought me for one of my birthdays the full 1980 tops, baseball card set because that was the
Nice.
year I was born. Like a little kid, I just like rifled through it and picked out the best cards, like the Ricky Henderson rookie card, and but those kind of memories. And then growing up in Columbus, going to Ohio State football games, I was actually just talking to a friend. Like my real lasting memories there are, both of my grandparents are OSU grads, and them like proudly standing up before games and singing Carmen, Ohio, which is like alma mater song. And it's not always just about what's going on in the field. And often as a kid, it's less about what's going on in the field, and more about those other memories. But certainly, you want, to be engaged and understand what's going on the field so you can have all those other memories as well.
Yeah, I can relate to so much of that. My grandfather bought me my first set of baseball cards. I'm a little older, so it was 1975 set, and my parents say I learned how to read by reading those baseball cards. And I grew up in Washington, D.C., but I'm from Wisconsin. My grandparents lived in Milwaukee. I would sometimes, fly back like kids did in that era by myself, to go see them in the summer. And my grandmother would always ask me, "What do you want to do today?" And I think every single time I said, go to the Brewers game. And I know that one time she and I went to four games in a row while I was there to visit my grandparents. Even with my own parents to this day, a lot of our conversations revolve around how are the Packers going to be this year or what last night's Brewers game. And for better or worse, sports has been a common thread. And I know that it is for so many families, like you mentioned. You're a dad now yourself. What is the role that sports plays with your own kids?
Sure. So my daughters are similar age to your kids. I have a 13-year-old and 10-year-old. And one, it's just as you said, it's always something that you can talk about no matter what else is going on. Kids change, they're growing up, but you always have something to go back to. And for me, one of the sports I love is tennis, and with the US Open on the last couple weeks, just coming home at the end of the day or late into the evening when all the kids activities are done, and just putting that on and talking about what's going on the TV, sometimes texting throughout the day, who's winning, who's losing. Those are just fun touch points that are easy, and constant. And so, with future fans, as we kind of started building the company, one of the best things is, I have the relationship with my kids around sports. But building Future Fans really helped me appreciate, the value of that, theme in our relationship and how to cultivate it, a little more intentionally and just appreciate it. And so whether it's US Open, in late August on a weeknight or, a football game on a Saturday or Sunday. It's something to do together. It's something to talk about before and after. And I just, so value that, as something to do with my kids.
You have a background as an entrepreneur in areas that have nothing to do with, sports or, what Future Fans addresses. But I know when people are looking to start a business, they're typically identifying a need, or a problem in the world that needs to be solved. What was the inspiration for this idea, and what problem do you think it solves?
Yeah, as somebody who does go out and do some of the entrepreneurial things, like the most important things is, is there a problem that you're really passionate about and that, you're, willing to devote time and energy and really get other people on board around. And for me, this, idea around sharing sports as a connection with kids is that, really mission driven passion. And it all started, my business partner Mike Schroeder is from Cincinnati and a huge Cincinnati Bengals fan, and they were going on this unexpected run to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. And he was at the first playoff win, and this was over 30 years of playoff win for the Bengals. But his wife was 36 weeks pregnant with his third kid, and so he had to watch the rest of the games at home. And he wanted to do so with his then 5-year-old daughter. And he had tried since she was born to get her to be a fan, and she wasn't, and she wouldn't engage in what for him was a life changing couple months. And so he came to me and said, kids learn, they're sponges, like there's something that we as parents aren't doing correctly here. So is there a better way to help engage kids around sports, to share those memories and those experiences. And so that was the initial spark. I immediately reflected on, my own relationship with my family around kids and sports, some of the stories that I shared here a few minutes ago, and thought, this is a really powerful idea. And then we set out to create the company.
And I think that his anecdotal experience was indicative of a larger trend, right? Like you've identified that young people identify as sports fans at a lesser rate than maybe they have in the past. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my business partner Mike and I were also management consultants by background. So we had this mission driven idea, but then we took a breath and said, okay, can we create a company around this? And what are other macro trends going on that may help our cause? And so Andrew, as you referenced, there's been a lot of research out over the last few years that successive younger generations are less engaged as fans than our generations or older generations. And there are, myriad reasons for this, changing, habits around, consuming media, right? When I was growing up, right, whatever was on the family TV and we had maybe one or two of them, like that's what we were all watching.
Hmm.
Today my kids have their own devices and, they're watching, streaming shows and whatever else. And so, and that's a trend that's writ large. And so, we see teams and leagues and others trying to do things to help engage that next generation of fans. But this is certainly a time where people are thinking about how kids engage differently with sports and therefore need to do different things to meet them where they are, to create that fan base for that next generation.
Hmm. Well, we'll talk about what's in these activity boxes and really get to the product in a second. But you mentioned, your business partner said kids are sponges. They love to learn. Like, what are we doing wrong? And you think about there's no lack of sports on TV or on phones or youth sports leagues. What do you think people have been doing wrong? I mean, like sports is out there to be
Yeah.
learned about. What was missing?
So sports are great, but our belief is that to, engage as a fan or a participant, you need to understand what's going on the field, right? Be it a football field, soccer field, whatever else. And that's not easy or intuitive. And so what we tried to do as parents was teach directly. Okay, so let's pause the TV. There's a yellow line. There are four downs. Well, when you say the word down to a 5 or 6 year old, they look down at their shoelaces, right? It's not intuitive. And so how do kids learn? They learn through stories. They learn through paired play. They learn through singing and dancing. And so, we were inspired by a chess product that teaches how each piece moves through parallel stories and games. And so we thought, okay, can we take a similar approach to teaching the rules of a sport? And so, just to give you an example, right? So instead of teaching downs directly, we created a beanbag toss game where a kid stands in a hoop. They have 4 tries to throw a beanbag into the next hoop. If they're successful, they get 4 more tries, or another first try. If they get to the last hoop, they get 6 points. Okay, so a couple of things there just by replacing the word try from downs, that's a bit of an unlock for a kid. And then we've embedded the core, concept of downs into a simple beanbag toss game. And so kids can play that game and then, have a basic understanding. Now that ultimately has to get translated and connected back to football, which we
Hmm.
do through a storybook and an activity box. And so we can get into some of the details of how the product works itself, but that's the concept, right? So you've got paired play, you've got words that kids understand, you've got some rhymes and songs that go along with it, and these are the way that educators know kids learn.
Hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about it. I think football was your first sport that you started with. Did you consult with educators? How did you come up with what you wanted to include in this activity box? And can you tell us about what is included in the box?
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, we were inspired by this chess product, and we knew we wanted to start with a story-based approach. And so we created this fictional sport summer day camp called Camp Rallyhoo. And then we devised, different parallel ways to teach the core aspects of the game, downs being the most important. And so, we started doing this ourselves, and we would define a way to teach, and then we would find all the kids in the neighborhood that we could to test it, and we created prototypes of the game, had kids play it, and then we showed them a clip of football and said, okay, like if the beanbag toss game were actually football, do you understand what's going
Mhm.
on? And so we kind of iteratively tested and built this out. In parallel, we did bring on, some folks that know a lot more about education and child learning than we do. We brought on a New York City-based children's book team that, brings to life the fully illustrated storybook geared towards kids ages 4 to 8. And then we also brought on a elementary school music teacher to help us with rhymes and songs geared towards kids to also help with some of the learning. So it's a mix of kind of our own iterative based creative approach as dads and business people, and then external expertise where it was most important, and ultimately came together into a system that definitely works to help convey these concepts to kids.
That's great. Um, would you say this is more geared towards developing, and we've talked about it, this context of young fans, same age group might be just learning how to play these games and become an athlete as well. I mean, would you have designed it differently if it was geared more towards teaching how to play these sports as opposed to understand how to watch them?
Yeah, we would have. And skills based learning is important. There's a lot of value to youth and recreation sports, be it flag football or rec soccer or otherwise. And so for us, our primary objective was to convey the core concepts of a given sport so that a 4 to 8 year old can sit either at a stadium or sitting on the couch and watch on TV and understand and enjoy what's going on the game. Now, that said, there's a additional benefit because when a kid understands what's going on, they're more likely to want to participate in other ways. And so for football, we've heard from some of our customers that this did encourage the kids to play youth flag football, and as we've done research with customers, kids who play youth flag football, it's great. You're out, you're learning, you're kind of learning how to engage with other kids and coaches, but you're not always understanding the rules because you're just running around. And so a lot of kids, ages 5, 6, 7, don't understand downs from playing flag football. So this is a way to help complement that. And soccer in particular, so many young kids play soccer. And so, even more, and soccer is our second product, we think that it will help with facilitating participation and understanding the game and connecting what they're doing in their youth soccer activities to understanding what's going on.
Mhm. So let's say a family orders the game, they buy it. I know it's for sale in various team stores and other spots, but you open up the box. Is it something that you do as a family one time? Is it like a board game where there's a winner and a loser? Is it activities you can come back to as the kid starts to understand the game? It's done its job. What's the sort of the life cycle, I guess, of the game, of the
Sure. Yeah,
box?
I'll describe it here. It's an activity box for learning a sport. So let's take football as an example. You get the box, and the first thing you do is begin by reading the storybook. And this is a grown-up and child, experience together. And so you read the first chapter, which is, these kids and counselors at this fictional sports summer day camp that we created, Camp Rallyhoo. And instead of learning the rules of football directly, right? They're just playing these fun camp games like the beanbag toss game that I described. And once the grown up and child finish a chapter, they're directed to pause, and then they get to open a surprise that's also in that activity box. And that surprise brings to life whatever the grown up and child have just read about in the storybook. And so, the beanbag toss game example I gave, grown up and child read about the campers playing that game in the storybook. They're directed to pause, and there's a surprise within the box with the beanbag toss game itself. And then the child with the grown up gets to play that beanbag toss game. And so that does a couple things and kind of how we developed the approach. One, it's this nice advent calendar like experience, so kids are encouraged to keep reading because they get surprises all along the way. And two, from an educational perspective, it's this nice multimodal stacking where a kid can learn a concept through reading, and then it's reinforced through play, and so it kind of builds on itself. Now, we didn't set out as educators to create it this way, but as we iterated with
Mhm.
kids and thought about what's the best way to do this, that's the approach we came to. And so there are subsequent chapters that the grown up and child read, and then subsequent surprises that they get to open. So that's how the box works. As I'd say, as we've learned from customers, right now is a time where a lot of people are buying the football box. We're in September. Everybody thinks their team is,
Mhm.
headed to the college football playoff or, the NFL playoffs, and which is great. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and so families are going through it now, to enjoy the season together. It takes a couple weeks to do, over some sessions, and then the family will likely come back to it at the end of the season or before the next season to refresh. And there are
Mhm.
things in the box that help also kind of curate the experience while you're watching. So there are laminated sheets with game watch bingo and a game watch score sheet. So all the different ways, to help facilitate a relationship and engagement around, watching and being a fan of a sport.
It's really interesting. I think about this connection between parents and kids around sports in some ways is so terrific. Like we talked about the bonding with multiple generations of families attending games together, having something to talk about, having something to do together. On the other hand, I think the biggest issue with youth sports right now is the parents, and all the pressures that come with travel ball and the people looking to really just seeing youth sports as a way to make money off of tournaments and equipment and fees. And it seems like this is a much healthier way for adults and children to interact over sports. I mean, is that a part of your thinking as well?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a sport fan and a parent of club soccer player, so I know that world.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, there's a lot to learn in sports. Sometimes your team wins, sometimes your team loses. And this is a great way to experience the kind of life lessons and the ups and downs, and hopefully do so in a way that is not super pressurized or creating any kind of negative associations with sports.
Yeah. What's next for you with this product?
Sure. So we have football in the market. From last year, soccer launched this summer, and we're currently working on baseball, basketball, and hockey, and we're going to get those all to kind of the point where we could pull the trigger on any one of them, and we'll see based on research and conversations with teams and leagues which make the most sense. And as you referenced, we do have relationships with NFL teams. We've been part of the NFL experience at the flag football championships, and building relationships in soccer around MLS and otherwise. So excited about that as a way to get the word out to sports fans, because we help create a fan and reinforce the fandom of an adult, and certainly that's what teams and leagues are looking to do, especially at that youngest generation.
Okay. What have been some of your favorite stories you've heard from customers, families that have played the game together about how it has not only taught the game, but given them something to do together as a family?
Sure. Yeah, a couple come to mind. One, especially, we talk to a lot of people who are really in the sports world. They're, journalists, or they're, former players who are now in the, sports media world. And for them, their kids often associate sports with them being away from the family,
Mm.
right? Because they're working on the weekends when sports are happening. And so we've heard from, at least three people in this world that their kids who were a little bit resistant to being engaged in sports because of that association, while this like opened up the world of sports in a different way, because it was this fun, inclusive, story based approach. So even for people that are kind of steeped in sports, this can be a great unlock for kids. And that's especially meaningful to us because these are people who have devoted their lives and careers to sports. And so to have a path to sharing it with their own kids, with our product is really special. And especially for folks that are dads and trying to connect with their daughters around the sport. So we've got plenty of people that do this with their sons, with their daughters, but in particular, this memory is around players and folks in the media and connecting
Mm.
with their daughters.
That's interesting. Okay, so if someone's interested, how do they find the product?
Yep. So we're at futurefans.com. We're also on Amazon. If you're in, Central Ohio or Cincinnati, we're at Learning Express and a few other toy stores. And our presence will be growing as well.
Well, one thing that comes to mind, and I'm 100% sure you're not going to go down this road, but I could see the sports books out there trying to develop young bettors in a game like this too, which is an issue that's top of mind for me because I really cannot stand how that has been normalized. And as I have kids watching so much sports on TV, going to games, I see the ads everywhere, and I don't want them to think that that is an essential part of being a sports fan, you know?
Yeah, it certainly changed the way that people, watch sports. If you're a fantasy football player, you're, watching games or watching snippets of games where you have individual players playing. And so I think like, there's some benefit to, engagement, but there's certainly also, a downside to how normalized it is. And so that's not anywhere that we're headed.
Mm.
But do know that it's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michael, this has been fascinating talking to you about this. I write books for kids, nonfiction and fiction coming soon that use sports as the hook to talk about social issues or to get kids interested in reading because there's an athlete on the cover. And I think it's interesting how you're using learning and reading as a way to get kids interested in sports, and so I think we have two sides of the same coin covered in different ways. And so I'm really interested to hear about this. Best of luck. It sounds like a surefire hit that you have on your hand. And I know that a lot of parents and families that are friends of mine will be really interested in checking this out. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.